Joining the show today is one of us by way of covering the beginning, the origins of the Minnesota Wild expansion team. Unfortunately, departing right before the legendary 2003 playoff run, followed by a long tenure with the Tampa Bay Times, and now writing for Poynter, where you can follow along with his daily newsletters at poynter.org. Tom Jones. Thanks for jumping onto this, Tom.
My sense of timing is impeccable, as Joe will tell you that I covered the Wild for 3 years and then left right before that magical playoff run. Then I was a sports columnist at the Tampa Bay Times and thought, I've written every sports column there is to write, right, in Tampa Bay. So I leave, and as soon as I leave, Tom Brady comes to Tampa. The Super Bowl's in Tampa. They win the Super Bowl in Tampa. The Lightning go to back-to-back Stanley Cups and win them. And the Rays go to the World Series. But other than that, my timing's spot on.
So now what we got to speculate on is what's going to happen when you leave Poynter.
I know. I mean, after the last 3 weeks, I covered the media, news media. After the last 3 weeks or month, I can't imagine anything could get any wilder than what we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe statement to make.
Yeah,
exactly.
What'll happen next? Oh, it's Donald Trump will be president. Yeah, we already seen that before, so nothing crazier than that. It's we ask every person who comes on a Rorschach test what you first thought when you saw the Wild logo. Like, what do you see when you look at it?
I love the Wild logo. I mean, it strikes me as outdoor. I think the first word I think of is outdoors. I mean, that's the word that jumped out at me. I remember when I first started covering the team back at we were just talking about the original team back in 2000. I love the logo. It's one of those logos too that I think when people, I don't know, does anybody not like it? Maybe over the past several years, the feelings have changed, but it felt like back in 2000, like everybody was on board, both inside and outside Minnesota. How do people like it now out there?
It's hit or miss, definitely. Like, some people love it. Some people very much don't want it. And I think half of those people, honestly, are still just bitter and want the North Stars everything back, which, hey, I get it. Crisp, beautiful logo. But it's funny just seeing every year. And the reason that we incorporate this every time is it's like every 6 months, I'll just see all of a sudden a new crazy thread on Twitter, or X, if we'll call it that, where someone's like, holy crap, did you guys know that the Wild logo is a bear? And like, people will just like start spewing off. Some are like, no, you're crazy. Others are like, you're just seeing that. And other people are like, oh my God, I see it now. It's like, how does this keep happening over and over in new waves? So
here's what I don't understand. So explain this to me. And the North Star, like this affinity for the North Stars, like they go back to these throwback uniforms. I get it. Throwback uniforms. Everybody does it. It's a way to make some money. I get all that. But how many times did the Wild wear like the green and yellow last season? Like more than a couple times, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Like, they're good. Explain to me the whole, like, the North Stars left. When I was there in 2000, people hated the North Star, or hated the Dallas Stars. Norm Green was, a curse word practically. And then they embrace it these days. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
It's funny too, because I don't know, Joe, maybe you have a different perspective on it, but I feel like most of the people that are like getting upset and clamoring for all of the old North Star stuff back are people that weren't even alive for the North Stars to exist. Like, I was 4 when they left. Like, some of the people that like get outraged and want to claim nostalgia, it's like, yeah, okay. Like, because you looked it up online. Cool.
Yeah.
I know. Well, they leave 93, right? Left in 93. Is that right?
94.
94.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been like coming up on 30 years either way. And so you're right. Like, even if you were 7 at the time, that's, I just can't imagine that you remember it well enough that you miss it. I don't know. I don't understand it. I love the Wild's colors. Their current colors. I love the emblem. I love the logo. I love everything about it. I don't know. I thought it was really cool.
So you think that was the right choice, though? Like, back when they were choosing between all the different options, I don't know how aware you were of what they were choosing from. You were like, yeah, Wild, they got it right.
Yeah, I thought they got it right. I thought it incorporated everything. It struck me as outdoorsy. It was definitely an outdoorsy type feel to it, which is, I think, was what they were going for. I've never been a huge or a huge fan of names that don't end in S.
Yeah.
It's because, and I covered, like Joe and I both, we covered the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. And it was one of those things where the paper that I worked at in both places, the Tampa Bay Times and then the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, treated the Wild as a singular now, which I never liked. I never said the Wild is undefeated in their last 5 games, or the Wild is
struggling on the power play or whatever.
Right, exactly. I always thought it should be Wild R or Lightning R.
Agreed.
And like I said, the both papers I worked at, the Times and the Star-Tribune, treated it as singular, which I just never liked it. The Times eventually changed it, I think, but
I think to R.
It took a lot of arm wrestling to do it. Yeah, yeah. Because nobody talks like that, so I write it like that.
As you know, the podcast is called Fellowship of the Rink, a stick tap to our Lord of the Rings fandom. We talk beer, we talk being new dads and the stresses of that. But I was curious what your nerd itch is. I think I know what it might be. In terms of you're a big baseball nut, and is that Stratomatic? I think.
I am a big card and dice sports game simulate player. I'm right now currently playing the 1977 Major League Baseball season solo in Stratomatic baseball. I am about to approach 900 games in. I'm the Minnesota Twins. Rod Carews hitting like 411 in my league. It's unbelievable. So that's it. I play Apple hockey too, and Stratomatic hockey and Stratomatic basketball. I play it all. Yeah. So that's definitely my nerd, my geek habit.
He's a big IPA guy too. So Tom, we'd all get along and get together to love IPAs. Scott's a good beer buddy up here. We like to go different places and grab a few. And me and Tom,
Tampa was good. Tampa checked out.
So it didn't used to be that way in downtown St. Petersburg, which is just growing like leaps and bounds. It's just amazing. And now that the new stadium is going to be built here, it really will, I think, continue to grow. But yeah, a big craft brewery scene in St. Peter, particularly in St. Pete, but in Tampa as well. Yeah, very strong, very strong.
I guess, how would you compare covering expansion franchises in both states, right? Like the Minnesota Wild and team coming back, everyone's probably just thrilled to death that they finally get hockey back in Minnesota, and then Tampa Bay, which was kind of played in what they call Cal Pasture or Cal Palace kind of thing. It was kind of unknown. So obviously two majorly different markets, but how would you compare covering the expansion team in both different places?
Yeah, the early on in covering the Tampa Bay Lightning, there were still times early in our coverage where we had to explain what a power play was, or explain what icing was, or explain what too many men were, and just a lot of catchphrases that a lot of people here got. But there were also a lot of new fans too, who didn't realize the famous story about the very first game in Lightning history. Chris Kontos scores 4 goals. And when he scored his third, people started throwing hats on the ice, and security grabbed people for throwing something on the ice. Like they didn't realize, like, no, you're allowed. Phil Esposito actually had to come over and tell the security to unhand the guy, That obviously changed over the years, as you know, Joe. Like it's a really smart hockey market. Like people in Tampa and in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, they are really smart hockey fans, and you no longer have to explain power play. But when I got to Minneapolis and St. Paul, I was struck by just like everybody knows hockey, like everybody. You don't have to explain. Forget about like the small details, like what is a power play, but like who should be on the power play. They had definite opinions about all of that stuff, and it was just really interesting to see. Now, I will say, as excited as people were for the Wild to come there, I was also blown away by just how strong the fandom was for the Gophers and Gopher hockey and high school hockey. When you get there, they call it the state of hockey. And as an outsider, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. Like, no, it really is the state of hockey. Like, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, where everything's football. High school football. Like, it's the same level of passion. I don't have to tell you guys. And so that's what struck me about going to Minnesota. And my kids played hockey. My oldest son started playing first, and he was probably like 7 at the time. And so I knew a lot of the parents, and they were like, they know who I was, just because, I read everybody followed the coverage. And it was really cool just how everybody was into it when I first got to the Twin Cities.
Was there like a welcome to Minnesota moment that kind of struck you? This market's different. Like for mine, like me and Caitlin and our dog Sammy went to Duluth, and we were a random brewery. I don't know, in the fall when we first got there, and somebody came up to me like, "Hey, Joe, thanks for moving here. I appreciate it." Blah blah blah. Like it's in middle nowhere Duluth, and like someone's like, "I'm like, how do you know who I am and like what it looks like?" Like I'm not a big, this big name guy or like that, but they just
yeah, it was probably going to a rink with my son, and somebody come up and say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "Oh, I work at the Star Tribune." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Tom Jones, yeah, I read you every day." That sort of thing. The other really cool thing, there were actually a couple. I remember getting a call one night at my house, and my wife answered the phone, and she says, and I heard her say hello. This is back before cell phones, really. We had them, but people still called your house. And my wife answered. She's like, "Yeah, hold on." And she goes, "Somebody named Herb is on the phone for you." And I'm like, "Herb? I don't know Herb." And then I get on. It was Herb Brooks. And he had read a story that I had written, and he wanted to talk about it. And I actually got to know Herb pretty well over the years. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the history of Earth that Herb Brooks called me and wanted to talk hockey. So that was one of my. And then I remember getting on an elevator with a couple of the 80 Olympians, like Rob McClanahan, and I forget who else it was. And then like Mike Ramsey was one of the assistant coaches on that team, on that first Wild team. But getting on an elevator at the press box at XL, and having Rob McClanahan introduce himself and realize like, yeah, everybody reads you here. It's not, it wasn't necessarily me, but I just happened to work at the Star Tribune. And then of course, the next question is, how's Sid?
Yeah.
So that was
God. Well, and I mean, Joe gives you grief, reasonably so, for your timing of departure.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, what Joe and Russo deal with today, both with just social media and people having such easy access, and let's be real, when you were covering the Wild, people were thrilled to have a team back. There probably wasn't a lot of negativity, whereas today it's like, all right, we've been doing this thing for over 20 years. What are we doing here?
That's a great point. That's absolutely the case. There was no, as sophisticated as the fans were when I got there, there was nothing the Wild could do that was wrong. They had great ownership back at the time. Bob Nagley was the owner. Doug Roswell was the GM. Everybody loved Doug. And then Jacques Lemaire, who is by far the smartest hockey person I've ever been around. And I've been around, Joe and I, we both covered John Cooper, who I think a lot of. John Tortorella is one of my favorite all-time people that I ever covered. You hear the stories about him, but he's actually really good to cover. But you're right. Like everybody was on board with what the Wild was doing. The expectations were not high. And yet they somehow managed to meet those and surpass those expectations. People didn't, back then, I remember a few years earlier, the Ottawa Senators won like 8 or 9 games their first year. Mm-hmm. Like the Wild was somewhat competitive their first year. And they had Marian Gaborik was a star right out of the gate pretty much. So it was, they were good enough that the fans were really into it. Today, it's, the Wild's lack of playoff success. I tease Joe about it all the time. Like, Coach watch, better not go out this night. Tonight, somebody's going to get fired, half joking, but I'm sure that's what you guys deal with all the time.
Well, and like you think people are obviously very hockey knowledgeable and sophisticated here, but every single article we write, I feel there's like 4,500 GMs commenting in there. Everyone played and coached their sons, so they know automatically more. They know what Giant Hines knows and everything else like that.
And it's a good thing that Russo doesn't engage with them.
Yeah, it's good that he doesn't start taking any fights.
When he does, I love it.
I'm kidding. He engages all the time, right? It's
he's done it more and more the last couple of years, but there was a stretch where he tried his hardest to toe the line, be professional, and now he's like, "No, you know what? I'm pretty comfortable with where I'm at. I'm gonna tell people how I feel."
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's that GIF out there, like if he goes, he torches you, it says you got roost. And there's a picture of a Russo, you got roost.
Beautiful.
And so you mentioned Jacques, and we had Sean Chambers on the pod too. He was obviously a former North Star, Dallas Star. He said
I covered him with the Lightning, Sean Chambers.
Yeah, in the original team there.
Yeah.
He said he learned more in his first 2 weeks with Jacques than he did his entire career. And that was he played for Hitchcock and all the other. He played for really good coaches. Like, do you have any favorite stories with Jacques that kind of illustrate what made him such a unique guy?
I remember talking to Willie Mitchell one time, defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, and he was telling me the same thing. And Willie, I think, had played with him a little bit in New Jersey before before he came to the Wild. But he was telling me that he said that Jacques was talking about like playing a guy coming down the wing. And Jacques was telling Willie Mitchell, he goes, make sure you look at his inside skate, the skate that's closest to the center of the ice, and which way it turns, because that'll determine which way. And Willie's like, wait, what? I do what? Like he said, I never imagined, like Jacques was so far ahead. Mike Farber from Sports Illustrated said one time, he may have even written it, that Jacques would have been perfectly content just to play a game of hockey like on a whiteboard with just like pieces.
Yeah.
Like that was his ultimate, just coach it, how to coach the game. And the players are almost like were like incidental to the whole thing. But just sort of the sophistication of just how detailed he could get. And I was just amazed. I was just blown away. And like Willie Mitchell, like he would tell you little things that players never thought of, or coming down on a 2-on-1 while shorthanded. Like never shoot towards the opposite, never try to go far side on the goalie because the puck will wrap around it. And Willie Mitchell was saying, like, how'd you shoot the puck? And he'd tell me, like, I should be aiming for this post or that post. And that's the type of thing that it was just really cool to watch him and also how to handle, like he would have practices some days that would literally last like 15 minutes. He just wanted to get him there, get him on the ice, skate him really hard, and then say, go home. Just I think how he dealt with players. He was a superstar himself. He's one of the few players who was a Hall of Fame player who then went on to become just an elite coach. A lot of times you don't always see that. Sometimes great coaches weren't great players necessarily, or players at all, like a John Cooper. But I don't know, just the smartest guy I've ever been around. Hockey-wise.
And how is he with the media too? Like I know we had Torts, and he's unique. John Cooper, smartest guy. He'll tell you that too. But like very funny, sense of humor. Like he's obviously unique in that way. And I always imagined Jacques, like for as smart as he was, I don't think he was a guy who would explain everything to you, right? He's kind of
no. And I remember the first time we sat down with Doug Risebrow, and it was Greg Johnson was the writer for the Pioneer Press back then, the first year. And we went over sort of like, what are the ground rules? What do you off the record, on the record, on background, and we went over all that. And then we had that conversation with Jacques, and I said, Jacques, how do you feel about off the record? He said, I will never go off the record with you. Everything I ever say anywhere is on the record. Now, he said that because half the time he wouldn't tell you anything, but I appreciated going in that if you quoted him in the paper, it was something that he had actually said, and he wasn't going to come back to you and say, I didn't mean for that to get in the paper,
Yeah.
So, and also too, it was really cool. He treated like the everyday media a little bit differently. I think I told you a story before, Joe. We were in a press conference after a game, and somebody who's not there every day. It wasn't from one of the main papers or radio stations. It was sort of a fringe type of media person. Asked a really bad question, I thought, and Jacques answered it. And then maybe later on, I asked kind of an awkward question, and he jumped me for it, like in the press conference, and kind of embarrassed me a little bit in front of everybody. And I remember after, I was kind of sour about it afterwards. And so we walk out, and I waited for him outside the room, the media conference room. And he comes out, and I said, hey, what was that about? And he goes, well, what kind of question was that? I go, okay, I asked a bad question, but I said, I asked it, and you jumped me. The other guy asked it, and you didn't say anything. He said, you should know better. And that's why I said that to you. And in sort of a weird sort of way, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of respect that,
Yeah.
So I like the fact that he was always on the record. He had a better sense of humor than sometimes he let on, but I liked how he dealt with the media for the most part.
Fair. Now,
speaking of, go ahead.
I was just gonna say how wild, not weird, trademark. How wild is it that Darby Hendrickson, who you saw there at the very beginning, has been a Minnesota Wild guy through and through until this summer?
It doesn't seem like I read that he's leaving, right? Or he's not coming back.
He's going to Nashville.
I was like, no, that can't happen. That's not right. You're not allowed. That's not that. The next thing I thought was this would never happen if Sid Hartman were still here. But it was it was a stunner. He was clearly one of the nicest people I ever covered. And I know I've told you this story before too, Joe. In 2000, 2. My mom had a surgery and she passed away suddenly. And I had to, my brother was with her in Florida. She was back here in Florida. And I rushed to come back, and she was actually in the hospital for a couple of days before she passed away. But I get a phone call one day, and I don't recognize it. And it was Darby. And he said, "Hey, I hear your mom's sick," or maybe she had just passed away. And he said, "Hold on." And he talked to me for 10 minutes and just wished me the best. And this is, I was just a guy. I didn't, I covered them, but I wasn't like, obviously it was still a media player relationship. And he handed the phone to Andrew Brunette, who also went on for a great, few minutes, just talking about how sorry he was. And I always remember Darby Hendrickson just reaching out to me when my mom had passed away, and could not have been nicer. Yeah, and it doesn't seem right that he's no longer a Minnesota Wild guy. So.
Well, it says a lot that he lasted through all those regimes, right? It speaks to the character he is, the person he is, and the coach he is, that not many guys can last through like 5 coaching changes, right? Like usually they bring in their own guys. So I think that's more of a testament, or kind of more of a reality check of like, hey, this doesn't happen in sports to have a guy like that.
And I also like to think that they know how much he meant to the community, how much he meant to Minnesotans. And he is. I mean, I think if you were to make a list of like great not necessarily best Minnesota hockey players, but like great Minnesota personalities, players, coaches, whatever, in the history of the state, I mean, he would be in your top 25, probably, maybe 30. I don't know. Maybe that's a little higher
than that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe higher. I like, just as far as like impact and likability and all that stuff. Yeah.
With that, what I love about this job, I think you do too, Tom, is the relationships you build and the rapport, and he's over time and trust, and you have great stories and memories in that respect. We also all have kind of the horror stories of things when things go awry and things go badly. I still screenshotted a text that Pat Burrell, the lovable slugger for the Tampa Bay Rays, sent me when I reached out when he got waived. It was a tough call to make and an understandably tough thing to do, but he texted me to lose my fucking number. So that was one of the things. We've all had ones that, arguments and back and forth.
Yeah.
I was curious, Manny Fernandez, like, what can you tell about that story and how that kind of went awry for you?
Yeah, Manny Fernandez, a goaltender, kind of a little bit of a, like, no more strange than your normal strange goalie, but he was a goalie in every sense of the way, and he was decent. He was a decent goaltender. I don't think he played quite as well as they'd hoped when they first got him, but he certainly had a high ceiling. Came in, he was their number one goalie right from the start. And about midway through the second season here, he stopped talking to me. And it was just a weird, like, I'd say hi to him in a hallway and he'd ignore me. And in press car, if I went up to him, "Hey man, you got a minute?" He's like, "Not now." And he'd walk away. And in scrums, he would answer everybody. He would only give me like yes or no answers. And finally I said to him, I went up to him one day, or actually I think I went to the PR guy, and I said, and I think Aaron Sickman was with the one there. I said, "Hey, can you check with Manny? Is there a problem?" He came back, he goes, and Aaron's like, "Yeah, Manny wants nothing to do with you." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I go, "What happened?" I start trying to think about, okay, what did I write? And I looked through the Star Tribune, all the stuff I'd written. I said, I haven't even written about Manny like in a month, like really written about him. And turns out I had, at the time, I was also doing some freelance stuff for faceoff.com. And basically it was just like taking stuff you've already written for the Star Tribune and just refurbishing it and put it, on faceoff.com. And I had written something about he had struggled or something, but it wasn't anything bad. So I finally talked to Manny and I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He's like, "I heard about what you wrote." And then he told me it was in Faceoff. Well, he didn't even read it. He had friends read it who were French and didn't understand English, but they got it through a translator somehow. And it somehow came out that I had ripped them when I was actually complimenting them. There was a word that they misunderstood. And I'm like, "What? You haven't talked to me for like 4 weeks because your buddies mistranslated a word from English to French or in French to English or whatever?" And I'm like, and he's like, "Yeah." And I say, he goes, "I'm sorry, but I still don't want to talk to you anymore." And he eventually did, but he was just a bit of a hard guy to deal with sometimes. And meanwhile, Dwayne Rollison was the other guy.
Yeah.
Who was like the greatest
Yeah.
guy to deal with in the world. You know, he was just a tremendous quote.
Did you write a big blowout story about Fernandez starting the first game or something like that?
Oh my gosh! Yeah. So it was it was the second year of the Wild. They were opening up on the road, and I wrote, "Man, he's the man. He's the Manny," I think was the headline, and it was this big blowout story on Manny Fernandez. Now this is his year, and he's going to lead the Wild, and so we go to practice the day before the opener. It's like I said, it's in San Jose. And Manny's still on the ice. Dwayne Rollison's coming off. And I said to Jacques, this is like 6 o'clock, like there. So it's like 9 o'clock Minneapolis time, right? Mm-hmm. And I said to Jacques, I said, hey, why is Manny still out there? He goes, oh, because we're playing Rolly tomorrow night. I have a big blowout story. The season opener. And they're going to start Dwayne Rollison. Like, here's the Manny. And then I put, it's like they're like jamming into singing Manny Fernandez, who will play actually game 2 tomorrow night in Arizona. Yeah. So I forgot about that.
That's pretty good.
Those are the things that, sometimes you get things wrong and it just,
I mean, the plan was he ended up, he was going to be their number one goalie, but it was back to back and Jacques wanted him to play game 2. And then Jacques didn't understand that. No, I need Manny to play tomorrow night.
Oh, you got that. Oh, that's good.
Your Sunday paper. What's the biggest difference or what is the biggest transition for you going into writing about political media and politics in general? Like I know how much you enjoy covering sports and how good you've been at being a columnist covering sports, but like what excites you about it? What drives you crazy about it? Like, how is it so different?
The biggest difference is like there were a lot of days when I had to write a column. It was my day to write the column in the paper, and I wake up in the morning, I had nothing, and I'm like, I can whip out something. I can take a topic, something going on with the Tampa Bay Bucks or something going on with the Tampa Bay Rays. I can whip up a column in 20 minutes. I can't do that now. Like, you have to know what you're talking about a little bit more when you're dealing with like national politics and you're writing about like Joe Biden and Donald Trump and because the stakes are a little bit higher. And I will say that working in sports got me ready for writing about politics, because as passionate as people are about Trump and people are about Biden, they're just as passionate when it comes to Gopher football or University of Florida football or any of that stuff. So it's the passion same. I do like it because you get a sense of you feel like you're sticking up for the media. You feel like you're sticking up for journalism at this job that I have now, that you're, and I also like showing how stories are done. So it's transparent so people can understand, like, these are people who are working really hard, journalists who work really hard to produce really good journalism to help democracy, not to certainly hurt it. But it can be challenging to when, oh no, I'm going to get a bunch of emails tomorrow.
That feels like a given.
I imagine you having like a nice little Sunday a week ago, maybe you and your wife going for a walk or going for lunch, and then Joe Biden drops out, like with your day just kind of like.
Well, like I said, the month I sat down and I watched the debate, and it literally was like a minute into the debate, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster for Joe Biden. Like, I thought I'll just monitor to make sure no one says anything really dumb. And like a minute in, like, oh my gosh. And then one of those nights I went out, picked up a bunch of food, brought it home for me and my wife, getting ready to set up, have a nice little dinner, maybe go out to the pool afterwards and turn on the TV. And there's been a shooting at a rally at Butler, Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. And then the next week on a Sunday, I get back have a nice big lunch, come back. I'm going to take a little nap, watch a little golf for a few minutes, and then get up and write my newsletter. And there's Joe Biden dropping out of the race. So yeah. And then, like I said, everything. And then today, I thought I'd get to today and actually some good news. But I thought today I'm going on vacation starting tomorrow. It's going to be a nice, relaxing, last day, and then the big news that Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal was released from a Russian prison today, which is actually fun to write about, actually. So
yeah, no kidding. And off of the shooting topic, and this is one, Joe, I haven't asked you about yet, and I figured this is the best time to ask both of you. I'm obsessed with the Florida man stories. I'm just going to read a headline and see if either of you want to run with it. Florida man arrested for bringing gun to hockey game. You guys don't know that, huh?
I don't know that. It wasn't Russo, right? It wasn't an old Russo story from his days of covering the Panthers.
So May 7th, 2015, Lucas Cassidy, 27, brought his weapon to Amalie Arena, where firearms are expressly prohibited. And it goes on from there. But I didn't know if either of you had any knowledge.
Joe, you would have been covering the team. Were you covering the team?
I was covering the team that year too. That was the year they went to the Cup final that year.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we were both at the Tampa Bay Times too. I'm sure that would have been like a big story, like, you know, if it was.
Yeah, it probably was in the Tampa Bay Times at some point. Did not know that. There you go. That's a good one.
All right, we'll circle back on that one.
Yeah. Do you have since people are getting to know me in this market a little bit more, obviously through the podcast, like seeing me and everything like that. Do you have a favorite Joe Smith story you wanted to share, like a on the road story or anything like that?
Yeah.
People might be nice to me, of course, but like I would have people.
I'll be nice to you. So we were covering the Stanley Cup Finals with the Lightning when they went and played Chicago. Early in that series, in the first round, they played the Detroit Red Wings, and Mike Babcock was the coach. And Mike Babcock starts every press conference. He would come out and he would say, "Hello." That'd be the first. He started every "Hello." So it became a catchphrase for Joe and I. Would "Hello." So the Lightning ends up going to the conference finals. They played the New York Rangers in the conference finals. They win Game 7 in Madison Square Garden. There's no way we thought they would win that game. So Joe and the Lightning were going to be off the next day. So afterwards, we have early flights. Joe was staying in one place. I was staying at my son lives in New York City, lives in Washington Heights. And then a couple people from the other newspaper, the Tampa Tribune. So we're going to have one beer. We're going to go find one beer, and we need to be back at our rooms wherever we're staying by 1 o'clock because we have 7 o'clock flights. So of course we get done with our last beer and slices of pizza at 3:40, 3:45 or whatever. So one of us made the flight back to Tampa. One of us did not. And Joe was the one that didn't make it back, but he did cancel and took a later flight. So then fast forward, we go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Lightning plays Chicago. They lose Game 6. The Lightning does. Series is over. We go to the media hotel, and there's hospitality. We're having a few beers there. And we have to leave the hotel at 6 a.m. for our flight to go back because we thought we might have to go back for a Game 7. Turns out we didn't. And so I tell Joe, I'm going to bed. Joe's like, I think I'm going to go get one more somewhere else. I'm like, no, don't you dare. He goes, no, who'd you go with? Pierre LeBrun or
whoever was where we walked 4 blocks somewhere. It wasn't necessary. It's always that one more beer that gets you.
So 6 o'clock the next morning, I'm in the lobby, 6:05, and I told him I will leave you. I am not waiting. I will leave you. So I call his room, no answer. Call his cell phone, nothing. I get in the taxi and I go, and we're flying out of I think it was O'Hare, right? So and we were staying downtown. So it was. Or maybe it was Midway, but wherever it was, there was no way Joe was going to make it. I go through security, do all that stuff, and the flight is at 8 o'clock, 8:30 or something like that. It is now 7:30, and I call Joe, and Joe wakes up in his room. He's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "Where are you, man?" He's like, "Oh no, I slept through the alarm." Blah blah blah, and I'm like, "Well, you're gonna have to get another flight. I'll see you back in Tampa." So I get on the flight. This is 7:30. The flight's at 8:30. Get on the flight. I'm looking at a newspaper. And the flight's empty. And all of a sudden I hear, "Hello." And I look up and there's Joe. I don't know how you could have possibly packed and loaded in a taxi and gotten through security from downtown to O'Hare or Midway, whichever one we were at.
I was so lucky.
40 minutes.
I must have left some stuff at the hotel room, and then I make sure no lights were out there, and no traffic, and then security. It had the perfect storm for me to make it. It was the
perfect, but for you to make it was amazing.
That's awesome.
I know you're probably like me, Tom, like to golf, but not good at golf. But our last question, Scott can give it to you, but we do it for every guest too.
Yeah. So we got our Waggle golf question. Everyone go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. We got to ask you here. If you were to pick 3 people, dead or alive, athlete, celebrity, doesn't matter, to round out your dream golf foursome, who's joining you out on the course?
Wow. Okay. So that's a pretty good one. I mean, a Tiger would be one of them, right? You just to play with perhaps the greatest golfer who's ever lived. So that would be one. I think I would maybe like just from a sports angle, maybe like Mario Lemieux, just because he's one of my favorite all-time hockey players.
We'll get along, Tom. That works.
Yeah. And then it might be somebody like Serena Williams or somebody who's I find Serena really fast. I don't know if she can play. I can't play. She can't be any worse than I was. I know they're not very exciting answers. They're all sports guys.
Nah, I'm good with it though. That's good.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun foursome.
Who's riding with you?
I think Serena, just because I'm fascinated by her dominance and I'm fascinated by her other interests, and I think she's one of the coolest people ever. Really, I've been watching a little bit Inside the Arena, or In the Arena, whatever that show's called, the ESPN, and I'm just fascinated by the elite athletes. There's something about when Brady was here, it was actually fun that I wasn't covering him because I was just fascinated just to watch his process, and there's such a what drives them, which is I think is really cool. You know, Brady would walk around with whatever spot he was picked in the draft, right? Like that number in his wallet. I'm like, you're the greatest quarterback in the history, but you still have a chip on your shoulder about where you got drafted. Stuff like that, I just find super fascinating.
Good Michigan man right there.
I knew it. I walked right into it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know you have the massage and happy hour daily there at Poynter at roughly about this time, so I'll have to let you go. But enjoy having you on and talking back in the early days of the Minnesota Wild when everyone was happy and no one wanted to flip out and quit on everything. But I think the glory days will be coming at some point.
Well, good luck with that. What you need from me is for me to come there, work for a while, and then leave, and then things will go great again.
Turn around. Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. Good to
have you.
Thanks,
guys. Yeah, thanks.